Charlie, would you please turn on the timer and uh, introduce Professor Kaneko?
Our next speaker today is Kunihiko Kaneko. Please tell us about your living histories.
Yeah. Okay. So I talk with this topic, and actually, I'm not quite sure who will be the ideal audience. So at least I give an idiosyncratic report to teenage myself. So, and in my high school days, so as you may expect, so I love mathematics and physics, and I study hard. But besides these standard things, I have somewhat four peculiar interests. One is philosophy of Chuang-Tzu, Jianji. So he is a Chinese philosopher about 200 BC, so very old philosopher. And so he discussed about chaos, use of useless, limit of reductionism, and what transferable by symbols are just superficial. And I learned many things from him, his book. And then the second one, so I learned from a chemistry teacher, is Le Chatelet principle. So Le Chatelet principle is a thermodynamic principle. So when part of the system, then there is a response to go against or relax the input. So this is somehow kind of general principle for stability state system. So I was somewhat, I don't know why, but when I heard that, I was quite excited. Okay, this might be a very important principle in general. So this is the second one. And the third one is that I like history. And I thought that macroscopic trends in the history may be predictable, even for each individual motion may be erratic. So this is something like a kinetic theory of gas molecules. So I was inspired by Tolstoy's War and Peace in that point. And the fourth point that were not known so much is that science fiction by Komatsu. And so actually, in his science fiction novel, who is successor, he proposed universal biology. And as biology, not restricted to those that happen to be evolved on Earth. And in his novel, it's explained as science to explore universal patterns and possible variation of living organisms in this cosmos. And it started to expand at the end of last century. This means 20th century. And since then, characterization of life in terms of topological geometry, and this means dynamical systems, has developed. And now, grand theory comparable to relativity is anticipated. So now is something now, according to his novel. So, and the undergraduate, so I was a physics undergraduate in University of Tokyo, and I like Schrodinger's book of What is Life? And I like some of physics lectures, especially I like Professor Kubo's lectures on statistical mechanics. Of course, Professor Kubo is a kind of legend who set up linear response theory, fluctuation response relationship, and all of these. And these are last lecture series at University of Tokyo. And also I learned Prigoghine's dissipative structure, Haken's synergetics, and somewhat I was a little bit misdirected that non-equilibrium physics would be essential to understand life. I'm not sure if this is true, probably not. But anyway, I was misdirected. So I entered statistical physics group at University of Tokyo. Unfortunately, Kubo would retire at 1980, so the successor Suzuki Rabai entered. So in the master studies, I worked non-linear non-equilibrium system by using stochastic process Rajvan equation. And in the first paper I wrote by myself, so this is adiabatic elimination of first variables in stochastic process. And fortunately, so this is still used recently in PRL last year in the study of deep learning in physics. So I'm a little bit happy with that result. And here, so time scale difference is important. So that is also my long-term theme. And then in PhD, I worked on chaos, so low-dimensional chaos, that especially transition from torus to chaos. And so this is the book I wrote. And so at the last part, I started working on spatial temporal chaos by proposing coupled map lattice. So here, turbulence is generally many degrees of freedom. But chaos is studied for low-dimensional system, just a few degrees of freedom. So how to bridge the gap between the two, I was wondering at that time. So maybe the simplest way, consider units for local chaos and put this on a spatial lattice and put some kind of spatial interaction. So in some sense, logistic map and Ising model. So that's a combination of these. So by doing this, we can discuss somehow spatial pattern and temporal chaos give some kind of interesting processes here. So the equation is very, very simple. But still, we have found spatial temporal intermittency, pattern selection, collective oscillation, and also there are some kind of analytic tools, co-moving Lyapunov exponents, or etc. So these studies. And then, after 5 years, I started interested in mean field model of this. So instead of spatial structure, so everybody interacts with everybody in the same way. So the equation is now much simpler. This, just logistic map coupled, and then the average of all of this. So just very simple equation, and maybe I can write a code within 10 lines or something like that. But still, I could write many, many papers, and also thousands of papers have been published in this problem. So especially, there are some kind of clustering, chaotic tendency, collective chaos, and many things. And for instance, clustering, even if, so consider 100 elements of this. So maybe even if these are identical elements, 50 elements oscillate in the same way, and 30 elements in a different way, 20 elements different way. So it's clustered. So then, at that time, I met a very young experimental biologist and finding isogenic bacteria in liquid culture differentiate, even without any spatial homogeneity. And he asked me why this is possible. Okay, I know. Even for this kind of simple units of this logistic map can differentiate. So why not for bacteria? But of course, bacteria is not just such kind of simple chemical logistic map. So I examine simple chemical reaction dynamics, plus interaction or gene regulation network, and many other things. And so we understand some cell differentiation and development in terms of dynamical systems. But to biology, evolution is most important. But this experimentalist is also doing experiment on evolution. So he put fluorescent genes into bacteria and evolve these bacteria to increase the fluorescence by mutation and selection. And then this fluorescence increases. So in this case, even for isogenic cells, clone cells can vary by noise. So this variance by noise seems to be correlated with this evolution speed. So each step, how average increases. So we found this kind of relationship in this experiment, in some others. And as a pupil of Professor Kubo, this reminds me fluctuation response relationship. Fluctuation response relationship says force to change a variable x. And then the response ratio, that is shift of x divided by force, is proportional to fluctuation of x without force. So this is kind of quite interesting. I originally started from Einstein. So, but these two are proportional. And in this evolution problem, so selection force is not a physical force, but some kind of selection to increase the fluorescence. And then before this increase the force, so this variance is without force, but this is proportional. So this seems to be somewhat similar. So of course, but this is quite, one is thermodynamics and this is biology. So we need to set up some kind of a new formulation and everything. And then we can have simulation theory. And then we found that variance due to noise and variance due to genetic change are proportional, and response by evolution and response by environment is also proportional. So that was a bit happy. And then, okay, according to that, change by environmental stress of each component is proportional to change by genetic evolution, and especially response by genetic change tends to cancel out the stress response. So this is somewhat quite similar to Le Chatelier principle in thermodynamics. So, but this is in evolution and or biology. So this is happy. And actually in underlying this, so there are many, many components and very high dimensional dynamical systems. But what is important is that due to the robustness, the direction of change is restricted to very low dimensional manifold. So very high dimensional structure, and due to robustness, so this many degrees of freedom gives this robustness, but plasticity is given by low dimensional structure. So this matches with this Chance's philosophy very much. So this is also interesting to me. So I set up Universal Biology Institute in University of Tokyo about 7 years ago, and then especially consistency with different time scale or spatial structure scales, molecule cell to organism and ecosystem. And so we are doing that. And then maybe can I satisfy teenage myself? But I found he may not be satisfied because there is surprising description of universal biology in the science fiction by Komatsu. He said that, okay, then there are extracted basic elements shape a system that balance each other in an organism. And by further analysis, the basic property of evolved life is approximately given by a linear model. Wow. Okay. So the last topic on history. So about 5 years ago, okay, 1 minute. It's the last slide. Okay. So I had a very good, graduate student, Kenji Tao, and he discussed this. So to understand universal anthropology, so social structure as multi-level consistency, so family, society, nation. And so by doing that, kinship structure, family structure, gives the interaction and the institution as a kind of universal structure. So maybe by this, teenage myself may be satisfied. Thank you. Sorry, a little bit longer.
Thank you for a fantastic talk, and I'm applauding on behalf of the audience. We have a question from the audience. So how do you work with biologists who are still skeptical about the role of theory in biology?
Oh, hi. I see. I saw that. Yeah, it depends on biologists. And also question. So if one is interested in very specific question, so for why this organism does these specific things, then maybe theory is not so useful. But if there is some kind of general question and some kind of evolution possibility or some other robustness or plasticity, then the general theory will be important, I think. And especially some biologists are interested in this.
Great, thank you. And another question. So the themes that you kind of drew these links back to your early reading of Chuang-Tzu and the universal biology. Curious, how much did those early interests drive the scientific questions you chose directly? And how much of this do you think kind of you notice these patterns later on?
Okay, so you mean how much universal or something like that? So,
yes.
So my ultimate goal is to set up a very minimal condition. For example, life system is that diversity and keep itself, maintaining itself and grow. And only by that, to understand some kind of evolution, adaptation, and differentiation. So that's a general trend in biological systems and robustness of total system. And or evolvability. So to understand such kind of general properties is my hope or my goal. And maybe some result of, for example, there are some kind of universal relationship between these kind of relationships. And these are at least observed and confirmed in some experiments, in bacterial experiments in laboratory or some other experiments in laboratory. And there are some other adaptation and differentiation mechanism. So I hope there are universal questions and that can be understood generally in collaboration with theory and experiment.
Okay, great, thank you. And we have one last question. So could you share your thoughts on the interplay between simplicity and complexity in this rich body of work that you described?
Simplicity and complexity, you mean?
Yes, maybe the interplay between those two ideas.
Okay. So in some sense, when complex system studies in physics has developed, so people are very much so excited that very simple equation can produce chaos. So from simple equation to very much complex behavior, so chaotic dynamics. And then another thing, this kind of what I worked on, this globally coupled map is just simple equation, just one equation, but it can produce a very rich phenomena. So that's from simplicity to complex behavior. But sometimes in biology, so sometimes they do a very simple thing just to adapt to this or just to evolve this. So, but they use very, very many degrees of freedom and to do this. So maybe if you want to do just this kind of thing, maybe much simpler way could exist. But somehow biology uses very much complicated mechanism. So in some sense, from very much complicated complex system to produce simple result. And that is probably related to many degrees of freedom are necessary to have this kind of robustness and plasticity. And maybe that I learned from this Chinese philosopher.
Great, thank you very much.